Hi everyone, welcome to my new podcast. I hope you're safe and grounded. This is a daily true crime series where fact meets fiction and psychology meets the unknown. Inside Xavier is not just a story about a crime, it's a journey into one man's collapse and a family that vanished into silence. Every day this week, we'll release one episode about one of the most chilling disappearances in modern France. April 2011, a father, a mother, 4 children, and a terrace hiding a terrible truth. The man at the center? Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès. A father, a fugitive, maybe, something else. In this podcast, we don't just follow the headlines. We try to understand the silence between the facts. We imagine the thoughts he never said. We ask the questions no court could answer. We step into the mind of a man who may have loved too much, or not at all. Thank you for listening. This is episode 1, The Terrace. Subscribe, and join me tomorrow for the next chapter. Episode 1, The Terrace. Inside Xavier, Anatomy of a Disappearance. April 21, 2011. Nantes, France. A street framed with modest trees. Quiet homes with ivy climbing up stone facades. It is a neighborhood of order, of routine, of children who return from school at the same hour, every day. At number 55, Rue Robert Schumann. Nothing moves. The shutters are drawn. The mailbox yawns, swollen with unopened letters. The garden smells of April, damp earth, fresh cut grass, but there is a scent beneath it. A darker note, almost imperceptible. It is from beneath the terrace that it escapes. A slab of poured concrete. Dry, unremarkable, ordinary in every sense, except for what lies underneath it. Agnes, the wife, and the children. Arthur, aged 20. Thomas, 18. Anne, 16. Benoit, just 13. Each wrapped with care, each placed with ritual, each accompanied by a rosary, fingers stilled forever on their final prayer. There is no blood in this scene. No struggle, only stillness and absence, because the father, Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès, is nowhere to be found. The house stands like a theater set abandoned after a final performance. The curtains are still drawn, the props unmoved, the scent of something once lived and now replaced by stale, unmoving air. There is a stillness inside that goes beyond silence, a sense that time itself has been stopped, captured like a photograph left too long in the sun. It is a 2-story, post-war construction with cream-colored walls, bordered in old red brick at the corners and windows. The shutters are a faded mint green, one hanging just slightly askew, a detail only noticeable to those who look too long. The terrace faces a modest garden. Lavender once bloomed here, now the soil is damp, and the grass wears the pale yellow of neglect. Inside, there is a coat rack near the front door. On it hangs Agnes' spring coat, beige, with one sleeve slightly twisted. Xavier's is missing. Atop the shoe rack below are 4 pairs of sneakers, muddied from the last time the children went walking in the woods behind their school. None of them were cleaned. To the left, the living room, a sofa with floral upholstery, the pattern worn where a body has sat too many times. On the coffee table, a book by Pascal Ponces. A bookmark sticks out midway through. The pages are bent, underlined. One line is circled in red pen. The heart has its reasons which reason does not know. The kitchen is spotless. Too spotless. A sponge, still damp, rests near the sink. There is a single mug left out on the counter, the one with a chipped rim, Agnes' favorite. The dishwasher is full but unrun. The list of groceries, handwritten in her round cursive, remains stuck to the fridge with a ceramic magnet shaped like a cat. In the dining room, 6 chairs surround the table. 5 are neatly tucked in. 1, Xavier's, is slightly pulled back. A napkin lies folded on the seat. Not accidental, not carelessness, but ritual. On the buffet, a framed photograph. The whole family at the seaside. Brittany, perhaps. Agnes wears sunglasses, her hand on Anne's shoulder. Arthur is mid-laugh, Benoit making a face. Thomas, as always, looks directly at the camera. Behind them, Xavier. He is not smiling, but he is present. Not far from the photograph is a stack of envelopes, each addressed in the same tight handwriting. Stamps affixed, ready to send. Some to family in Versailles, one to a lawyer in Nantes. The contents will later stun the investigators, a farewell letter cloaked in bureaucratic calm. Claims of a life uprooted. An undercover operation, the family being taken into protection. Lies composed with such precision they border on the convincing. The bedrooms are untouched. Anne's walls are lavender. Posters of a Korean pop band above her bed. Books stacked beside her lamp, Balzac, Saint-Exupéry, and a well-worn copy of Les Miserables. Her desk has a folded paper note. On it, Je t'aime. Ne change jays. She never got to answer it. Benoit's room is simpler. A model solar system hangs from the ceiling. He'd painted each planet by hand, Jupiter too big, Earth too small. There are Legos on the floor. A drawing of the family, still half-colored, clipped to a corkboard. In it, all 6 figures are holding hands. Arthur's room is darker, lined with textbooks. Philosophy, economics. The desk is arranged, even at 20. One page is open in a journal. I think he's slipping. Papa doesn't speak the same way anymore. It's like he's rehearsing something. Thomas's room remains the quietest. A guitar leans against the wall. Strings unbroken. His rugby jersey lies folded on the bed, as if waiting for someone to wear it again. The upstairs hallway smells faintly of detergent. The air is thick, as if no window has opened in days. The walls bear faint marks, scratches from moving furniture, the trace of children's fingers once dragged along them. And yet, no sign of chaos. No drawers overturned, no shattered glass, nothing out of place. It is not a scene of violence. It is a scene of meticulous farewell. Back downstairs, the terrace stretches from the rear doors to the lawn. A simple stone structure, practical, not decorative, the kind of terrace one uses to dry laundry, or sit with a morning coffee. But beneath it, the bodies. Laid out not like victims, but like a procession, rosaries in hand, hands folded, mouths closed, eyes shut. There is reverence in the arrangement. There is intimacy. There is also something darker, the signature of a man who believed he was both executioner and priest. Who wrote his own liturgy? Who sealed his sins in cement? At this point, the neighbors have not yet called the police. The smell is faint. The silence, explainable. The family, they believe, has gone south. And Xavier? He is gone too. But the house knows. The house remembers. And soon, it will speak. And yet, no sign of chaos. No drawers overturned. No shattered glass. Nothing out of place. It is not a scene of violence. It is a scene of meticulous farewell. Back downstairs, the terrace stretches from the rear doors to the lawn. A simple stone structure. Practical, not decorative. The kind of terrace one uses to dry laundry, or sit with a morning coffee. But beneath it, the bodies. Laid out not like victims, but like a procession, rosaries in hand, hands folded, mouths closed, eyes shut. There is reverence in the arrangement. There is intimacy. There is also something darker, the signature of a man who believed he was both executioner and priest. Who wrote his own liturgy? Who sealed his sins in cement? At this point, the neighbors have not yet called the police. The smell is faint. The silence, explainable. The family, they believe, has gone south. And Xavier? He is gone too. But the house knows. The house remembers. And soon, it will speak. The final night. The night before the silence fell. The house was still alive. It was a Tuesday. The kind of evening that carries no weight of significance unless you're looking backward. There had been dinner. Not grand. Not somber. Just a meal like any other. Chicken with herbs. A salad that had wilted slightly before it reached the table. Agnes had prepared it. Thomas had set the cutlery. Benoit had argued about dessert. Arthur, home from university, had sat at the end of the table, scrolling through his phone between bites. And Xavier had watched them all, not with the eyes of a father, but with the eyes of a man saying goodbye. He barely touched his plate. The room was lit by a single ceiling bulb that cast a soft yellow haze, warm but flat. The kind of light that conceals as much as it reveals. The clinking of forks against porcelain. A chair leg scraping. A cough. Laughter, once. Then nothing. Xavier looked around the table as though it were the last time he would see it like this, which, of course, it was. He made a joke. Something mild. A pun, perhaps. The sort of thing that barely lands. Agnes smiled politely. Arthur did not look up. Anne nodded without hearing. And in that moment, he might have felt a sting of absence, not because they were ignoring him, but because they were still alive. Still untouched. Still capable of slipping away. After dinner, the children went to their rooms. Anne hummed a tune as she climbed the stairs. Thomas grabbed his guitar, not to play, but to hold. He would fall asleep with it beside him. Benoit, ever the dreamer, took out his sketchbook. He would fall asleep with it in his lap. Arthur opened his laptop. Agnes stayed downstairs, washing dishes in silence. The sponge moved in circles. Clockwise. Then again. Then once more. Xavier stood by the window. His silhouette framed by drawn curtains and the faintest slice of moon. His fingers played with the edge of the drape. His eyes wandered beyond the glass. There was nothing remarkable out there, just streetlights and parked cars. But he stared as if memorizing the ordinary. When Agnes turned off the kitchen light, he spoke, "You should go to bed." Her hands dried themselves slowly on a towel. She didn't respond, not right away. Then softly, "Will you come up soon?" A pause. A nod. She kissed his cheek, not the lips. Not tonight. And then she climbed the stairs. He stayed in the living room. For 43 minutes, according to the timeline reconstructed later, Xavier remained motionless. Perhaps he prayed. Perhaps he unraveled. Perhaps he rehearsed. The rosaries had already been prepared. The tools already hidden. Outside, the city of Nantes breathed quietly. An ambulance passed somewhere in the distance. A dog barked. A tram squealed along its rails. Inside the house, the air felt dense, like a cathedral holding its breath. He walked through each room. First Benoit's. The child had fallen asleep with a flashlight under his pillow. The drawing on his lap was of a rocket ship and a cat in a helmet. Xavier stood at the threshold. He did not move. He simply watched. Then Anne's. She slept facing the wall, her hand curled near her cheek. He remembered the first time he held her. The impossibly small fingers. The way she cried when they brought her home. He wanted to say something. But he couldn't. Thomas slept with one earbud still in. The screen of his phone glowed faintly from the pillow beside him. The song he'd chosen repeated itself in a whisper, a sad, slow rhythm with no lyrics. Xavier turned the phone over, gently. Arthur's door was closed. He knocked, lightly. A murmur from within. "Yeah? Bonne nuit," Xavier said. A pause. Then, "Night." That would be the last word exchanged between father and son. He returned to his room. Agnes was already asleep, her glasses folded neatly on the nightstand, above a novel she never finished. She slept curled toward the wall, away from him. Her shoulder rose and fell in rhythm with breath. He watched her, longer than he should have. He did not lie beside her. Instead, he went to the basement. There, the concrete was cold, the air thinner, touched by earth. The tools were laid out, as if waiting. The sedatives were measured. The gloves were placed. We do not know what he thought in that moment. We can only guess. Was it guilt? Certainty? A belief that he was saving them from something worse? Or had the rituals, the prayers, the envelopes, the orderliness, already numbed him beyond questioning? He returned to the children's rooms just before 3 a.m. one by one. Quietly, efficiently. There was no mess, no outcry, only the sound of a father tending to what he'd convinced himself was mercy. Agnes was last. The police would later note the precision. The calmness of the scene. No blood, no chaos. The beds still made. The children still dressed in their pajamas. As if the night had simply extended its reach. He wrapped them each with care. Blankets, rosaries, crosses, as though tucking them in one last time. It took him several hours. Then, as dawn approached, he made coffee. He stood at the kitchen window. The same view. The same mint green shutters. The garden, still shadowed. The birds beginning to chirp. The sun still hiding. He sipped slowly. He stared. And then, he began to dig. Arthur, the firstborn. He was 20, and too old to be blind. But not old enough to understand that silence, in a family like his, was the deadliest inheritance of all. Arthur Dupont de Ligonnès was the firstborn, tall, composed, with the kind of seriousness that doesn't come from books, but from watching your parents too closely when you're still too young. He was in his second year at the Catholic University of West, a curious place, full of future notaries, economists, priests, and ghosts in pressed collars. He studied economics with the quiet intensity of someone who believed in plans. In structures. In numbers. Because numbers didn't lie, people did. That spring, Arthur had returned to Nantes for Easter break. His dorm was too cold. His exams were still weeks away. And his mother, always the proper one, had insisted on a full house for the holidays. He arrived on a Thursday with a duffel bag, a half-read book by Sartre, and a tired smile. Xavier had picked him up from the train station. The ride back had been silent. They passed through the same streets they always did. Arthur noticed that the gas tank was nearly empty, unusual. His father, always prepared, always methodical, had once lectured him about never letting it drop below a quarter. But the needle was nearly on red. Xavier didn't seem to care. He drove slowly, hands at 10 and 2, eyes on something distant. At home, the mood was warm, but fragile. Anne had made him a drawing. Benoit showed him a new planet he'd painted. Thomas offered him a new band to listen to. Agnes hugged him tightly, her breath catching just slightly at the end. And Xavier patted his back, smiled, and said, "We missed you." But something in his voice was too round. Too soft. Arthur felt it. He didn't say it, but he felt it. That night, after dinner, he sat in the living room while Xavier reread a letter at the dining table. Arthur saw the envelope. The handwriting was his father's, but neater than usual, almost studied. It looked official, like something that had already passed through a lawyer's hands. Xavier folded it 3 times, slid it into an envelope, licked it shut, placed it neatly in the drawer. "Everything okay?" Arthur asked. Xavier turned, surprised. "As okay as it can be," he said. Arthur nodded, but the words stayed with him. Arthur had always been the observer. Even as a child, he'd known how to disappear into a room, to watch, to listen. Not out of fear, not out of caution, but out of that quiet instinct children of disintegrating fathers often develop, the ability to read the temperature of a man's mood before he speaks. The way some people check the sky before hanging laundry. Arthur had learned to check Xavier's silence. There was a time, not so long ago, when Xavier would tell him everything. About finances, about clients, about his dreams, businesses that would finally take off, connections that would finally open doors. But lately, nothing. The last time they spoke in any real depth had been 4 months earlier. Arthur remembered it clearly, a Sunday morning phone call. He had mentioned a philosophy course he'd taken. They had spoken about Pascal, about the idea of the wager, that it was safer to believe in God, just in case. Xavier had laughed then, in that way he did when he disagreed but admired the thought. But near the end of the call, his tone shifted. He'd said, "You know, sometimes I think life is just a long chess game where someone else already made the winning move." Arthur hadn't known how to respond. Now, at home, that feeling returned. There were small changes. His father no longer read the newspaper in the kitchen. He read it in the garage, alone. The door was always half closed, like a secret being poorly hidden. One night, Arthur passed by the door and caught a glimpse. Xavier wasn't reading. He was staring at the concrete floor. A rosary lay on the workbench. Beside it, a manila folder filled with maps, printed emails, handwritten notes. Arthur didn't ask, but later, in his journal, he wrote, "He's distant in a way that feels rehearsed. He's performing stillness, like someone who's already left the room, but forgot to take his body with him." The last full conversation they had was the night before Arthur left again for school. Xavier knocked gently on his door. It was late. The house was already asleep. Arthur was reading. A thick volume of Camus, open beside a notebook. Xavier stood in the doorway for a moment, saying nothing. Then, finally, "You know I'm proud of you, right?" Arthur looked up. "Of course. I don't say it enough." Arthur smiled. "You do. In your way." There was a long pause. Xavier stepped inside. He sat on the edge of the bed like he had when Arthur was 10. Except now the bed creaked under his weight, and the space between them was filled with unspoken things. "You're the only one who sees me," Xavier said. Arthur blinked. He didn't understand the weight of it, not fully. But he felt the tension behind it. That invisible thread of sorrow that runs through certain men like a low-grade fever. "Papa, are you okay?" "I'm tired," Xavier said. Then he stood. "Get some rest. You have a train tomorrow." He turned off the light. Arthur lay in the dark, unsure of what he'd just witnessed. It felt like a goodbye. Not a dramatic one, but the kind you don't recognize until after the door has closed. In the aftermath, when the police pieced together the timeline, they concluded that Arthur was likely the first to die. He had returned to Angers, his university town, but Xavier had made a trip there soon after. Arthur had sent a text to his younger brother around 10:30 p.m. Nothing unusual. Just, "Tell Mum I'll call her Sunday." He never did. When his body was found beneath the terrace, it was wrapped with the same precision. Blanket, rosary, hands folded. His journal, discovered in his dorm, contained one last entry. The handwriting was hurried, not panicked, but urgent. "Something isn't right. He's different. I don't know if I'm imagining it. But it feels like he's planning something. Like he's already gone." Arthur Dupont de Ligonnès, 20 years old. He dreamed of becoming an economist. He liked black coffee and cheap notebooks. He once spent 3 weeks building a spreadsheet to plan a family vacation that never happened. He saw everything, but not this, not soon enough. Thomas, the quiet witness. Thomas was 18, old enough to see through his father, but too young to walk away from him. He was the middle child, the one who never caused trouble, and never asked for anything more than space and time. At school, they called him Le Discret. Not because he was shy, but because he watched people like he was sketching them in his mind. He played rugby, but preferred the guitar. He went to mass, but prayed with his headphones on. And most days, He said little, but felt everything. He looked like his father. That's what people said. Same jaw, same brow, same habit of pinching the bridge of his nose when deep in thought. But the resemblance stopped there. Thomas had a softness to him. Not weakness. Just that rare kind of quiet that made you want to tell him things you couldn't say out loud. That last week, he seemed distracted. Agnes had noticed it. So had Anne. He was slower at the table. Slower to respond. Not sad, just elsewhere. He kept his door closed more often. He took longer walks alone. And when he returned, his hair smelled like rain and cigarette smoke, though no one ever saw him light one. In his room, there was a spiral-bound notebook. Nothing remarkable, the kind sold in every corner shop. Inside, song lyrics, half poems, quotes from books, and 3 pages, just 3, about his father. There's something going on, he wrote. He won't say it, but he's pulling away. Like he knows something's about to happen, and he's already forgiven himself. On Tuesday, 2 days before he died, Thomas left the house at dusk. He walked down to the bridge, the one near the post office, where the Garonne curved, and the older boys used to hide cigarettes under the concrete railing. He sat there a long time. No guitar, no phone, just a boy in a navy hoodie, watching the river move around the things it could not carry away. A neighbor passed by. She would later tell police that she saw him sitting there, knees pulled in, eyes open, but vacant. He didn't wave, he didn't smile, but he nodded, like he knew she saw him. And like that was enough. That same night, he returned home around 10. Dinner had already been cleared. The house smelled of dish soap and leftover wine. Xavier was still awake, waiting. He sat at the table with a glass of red, half full. Not touched. Thomas placed his guitar against the wall, slid into a chair, and said nothing. They sat like that for several minutes. Finally, Xavier said, "You remind me of myself at your age." Thomas shrugged. "I hope not," he answered. Xavier chuckled, but his eyes didn't. "You're quieter," Xavier said. "More careful with the world." Thomas looked up. "Or maybe I just see things you pretend not to." Another pause. Xavier nodded. "You always were the watcher." Thomas stood. He picked up the guitar. "Not anymore," he said. And went to bed. It was the last conversation they ever had. The next morning, he woke late. Unusual. He was always up before Benoit. But that day, he stayed in bed until nearly 9 o'clock. The family moved quietly around him. Breakfast was made. Benoit argued about cereal. Anne turned the volume up on the TV. And Xavier, he watched the stairs. He didn't call Thomas down. Didn't ask if he was okay. He just waited. Later that day, Thomas left a voicemail for a friend. "He's getting weirder," he said. Like, not angry. Just, resigned. It's like he already knows we're gone. The timeline, as reconstructed by investigators, suggests Thomas was likely killed 2 nights after the others. 2 nights. That means he lived in the house. With the silence. With the stillness. With the absence of his mother. His siblings. With no one answering his knocks. With a father who paced. Prayed. Pretended. 2 nights where the air grew heavier and no one came back from upstairs. 2 nights where he may have asked questions, and not liked the answers. 2 nights where a son lived among ghosts. And never told anyone. They found his guitar still leaning against the wall. Strings tuned. No dust. On his pillow, a folded sweatshirt. Inside the pocket, a rosary. One not his. His bed was made, but not by him. His shoes were missing, as if he never left. And never planned to. On his desk, a final note. Written on the back of a printed psalm sheet. A single sentence. "If I disappear, don't look for me in the light. I'll be hiding where the music stopped." Thomas Dupont de Ligonnès, 18. A boy with the face of his father, and none of his cruelty. A boy who heard everything. And said just enough. A witness who spoke in chords, not confessions. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He listened. He stayed. And when the silence came for him, he met it like a poet. Not a child. Anne, the heart of the family. Anne was 16. That impossible age between belief and defiance. Where innocence begins to fall away, but hope still clings to the corners of your voice. She was the 3rd child. But in many ways, she was the center. The kind who remembered birthdays without reminders. Who helped set the table without being asked. Who stayed behind in the kitchen when Agnes looked tired, just to dry the plates while humming under her breath. Anne was light, not the blinding kind, but the quiet glow that holds a family together. She loved music, not just any music, but melodies with heartbreak in their bones. Soft French ballads, early K-pop, old movie soundtracks, She danced in her room at night when she thought no one was listening. But Thomas sometimes stood in the hallway, smiling to himself as her shadow moved behind lavender curtains. Her walls were covered in postcards. Paris, Rome, Kyoto. She had never left France, but she collected cities like someone planning a great escape she didn't know when she'd take. There were notebooks too, filled with short poems, tiny declarations, and the beginnings of stories she never showed anyone. She wrote in purple ink. Always. The last week of her life. Anne had started to feel something. Not a fear, but a chill in the house. Like a window left open somewhere she couldn't quite find. She asked Agnes if everything was all right. Her mother said yes, but her smile was too tight. She asked Xavier if he was still working in Versailles. He said yes, but avoided her eyes. She asked Thomas if he was okay. He said, "Are you?" They both said nothing after that. One night, she found her father in the living room. Sitting in the dark, the TV off, his glass untouched. "Papa?" she asked. He didn't turn his head. Just said, "It's good to be quiet sometimes." She sat beside him, their shadows long on the wall. "Is something wrong?" He hesitated. Then he said, "Do you trust me?" She looked at him, for longer than a girl her age should have to. Then nodded, but her heart already knew it wasn't the right answer. Anne had a best friend named Elise. They texted every day, talked about boys, teachers, dreams they barely understood themselves. On April 14th, Anne sent a message that read, "Papa's acting weird again. He keeps looking at us like he's saying goodbye. But maybe I'm being dramatic lol. See you at school." She never showed up. Investigators believe Anne was the second child to be killed. Possibly the same night as Agnes. Or the morning after. She was found beneath the terrace, beside her mother, with her favorite scarf folded beneath her neck like a pillow. Her fingernails were painted, light pink, no chips, still perfect. She had been dressed, not in pajamas, but in her Sunday blouse. The one with the embroidered collar. A rosary was tucked into her hand. As if Xavier believed this would guide her to whatever came next. Her journal was still in her room. Unhidden, unburned. On the last page, a single phrase written in capital letters. "Someone is hiding something." And beneath it, a tiny heart, drawn in purple ink. The thing about Anne was that she noticed things. She remembered what people wore the day they lied to her. She could sense tension in the way a hand gripped a cup or the time someone took to answer a simple question. She had a gift for empathy, and a curse for recognizing discomfort. And when Xavier began to unravel, she saw it. She just didn't yet know what to name it. There's a story Agnes used to tell. About the time Anne, at age 4, saw a bird hit the window. The thud had startled everyone. The boys laughed. Anne ran outside. She held the tiny thing in her palms. It was shaking, broken-winged, still alive. She sat for an hour in the grass, humming to it, stroking its head with her smallest finger. And when it died, she wept. Not loudly, just into her knees. And then she buried it with a spoon. Not because she was told to, but because she believed everything deserved to be laid to rest with love. Anne Dupont de Ligonnès, 16, a girl who saw through silence. And loved anyway, the heart of the family. A sister who protected, a daughter who sensed, a soul that softened every room. She didn't fight what was coming. She felt it, and still, she stayed. Benoit, the smallest. Benoit was 13, but still more boy than teen. His voice hadn't cracked yet. His arms were thin. His handwriting wobbled when he hurried. Which was often. He was the kind of child who hadn't yet learned that the world could fail him. He still believed in science. In planets. In secret codes. In the idea that families stay together, because they are meant to. He didn't talk back. Didn't sulk. Didn't question the rules. He built. He colored. He asked. So many questions. The kind of questions Xavier used to answer before silence became his only language. Benoit had a corkboard above his bed, pinned with drawings, soccer ticket stubs, and a note from his mother that read, "Mon petit soleil, never forget how bright you are." He had a favorite mug. It said, NASA, in peeling silver letters. He drank milk from it every night, even when he was too old for milk, even when Agnes told him it would make him pale and round. He laughed when she said that, but still finished the glass. He played piano, just one song, really. Beethoven's Ode to Joy. But he played it over and over. Imperfect. And proud. The last time anyone outside the house saw him was the Tuesday before the silence. He was walking home from school, dragging a backpack that was too heavy for him because he refused to leave his model rocket in his locker. He waved at the baker. He crossed the street without looking. And when he entered the house, the door closed behind him like a curtain. Benoit loved puzzles. He would sit cross-legged on the living room floor, turning pieces over one by one, whispering to himself as if the image would speak if only he listened long enough. That week, he had started a new one, A Sky Full of Stars. He had almost finished it. Only the corners were missing. When police entered the house later, they found it still on the table. A single piece, a corner, clutched in his tiny hand beneath the terrace. There was no diary, no final message, no confession, but there were clues. In his school notebook, between math problems and doodles of planets, there was a short story. Titled, The Disappearing Man. In it, a boy's father begins to fade. Not all at once, but slowly. First his shadow, then his laugh, then the way he calls your name. And in the end, he is just a voice behind a door that no one opens. It is believed Benoit was killed last. Perhaps not out of cruelty, but because Xavier didn't know how to let go. He was still a child. Still asking to stay up 10 more minutes. Still trying to build things with 2 small hands. Still humming when he brushed his teeth. His room was the smallest, but the brightest. Toy rockets lined the shelves. A poster of the solar system hung above the bed, each planet labeled in bold letters. Venus had a smiley face. Pluto wore a crown. His pajamas were folded at the foot of the bed. Blue, with tiny white stars. Still clean. Still waiting. Xavier wrapped him gently. That much is clear. His blanket tucked with care. His rosary looped around both hands. His shoes placed beside him, one neatly turned inward, as if mid-step. And beside him, the final corner piece of the puzzle. Unplaced, but chosen. A neighbor said that, days later, a strange sound could be heard from the garden at dusk. Like someone playing piano through a closed window. Not the melody, just the rhythm. Tap, pause, tap. She thought it was a wind chime. But there were no wind chimes at 55, Rue Robert Schumann. Only a ghost of something half-finished. Benoit Dupont de Ligonnès, 13. A builder. A question asker. The smallest voice in a house full of silence. He didn't understand what was coming. He didn't try to fight it. He simply trusted, until trust became a final lullaby. Agnes, the faithful wife. Agnes Dupont de Ligonnès was 48 when she died. A mother of 4, a wife, a teacher, a Catholic. But before all that, she was a girl who believed in order. In God, in duty, in the quiet rhythm of repetition. She kept lists, cooked on a schedule, paid the electric bill before the due date, always. And when Xavier's chaos began to spill across the carpet of their marriage, she swept it silently under her own feet. She had met him young. Too young, perhaps. He was charming, not in the dramatic sense, but in that slow, deliberate, studied way that makes a woman feel like she's been noticed. He spoke like a man who read, walked like a man who had plans, and carried a sadness that made her want to comfort him before she even knew what it was. They married in the spring. Her parents approved. His didn't object. And the ceremony was simple, clean, proper. She wore ivory. He wore navy. And when he said, "I do," she believed him. Years passed like pressed flowers in a book. Children came, one after the other, their lives filled with laundry, car rides, bedtime stories. Mass on Sundays. Agnes was the center of the house. Not by force, but by gravity. She was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's dentist appointments, but forgot to schedule her own. But something had shifted in Xavier. Maybe it was the money. Maybe it was the weight of the lie he carried in his spine. Or maybe he had always been 2 people, and only one of them knew how to love her. The last year of her life was spent waiting. Waiting for a check that didn't come. Waiting for Xavier to come home from one of his trips. Waiting for her husband to speak to her like he used to before his voice became another room she couldn't enter. She wrote emails to friends. Cryptic, tense. Xavier is not himself. Please pray for us. And to her sister. If anything happens to me, know that I did everything I could to protect the children. She kept a journal, not daily, just, sometimes, when the silence grew too sharp to swallow. In one entry she wrote, "He looks through me now. Like I'm furniture. Like I'm a photograph of something he used to love." On the last Sunday before it happened, Agnes went to Mass. Alone. She wore a navy coat. She sat in the back row. And when the priest spoke of redemption, she bowed her head lower than usual. A neighbor said she looked tired. That she didn't sing. That her rosary moved between her fingers as if she were measuring time itself. That night, she cooked beef stew. Thomas peeled the carrots. Anne lit the candles. Benoit folded the napkins into clumsy swans. Xavier was quiet, but present. She poured him wine. He drank it. After dinner, the children went upstairs. Xavier stayed in the living room. And Agnes washed the dishes. Twice. First with soap, then with just water. When she dried her hands, she stood in the doorway. "Will you come up soon?" she asked. Xavier nodded, and she kissed his cheek, like a habit. Police believe she died that night. There were no signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. No overturned objects. Just the absence of breath. The cooling of a body that had held everything together until it couldn't. She was placed beneath the terrace with a scarf around her neck. The same one she wore to mass. Her rosary was clasped, not forced. Clasped, as if someone had folded her hands and whispered a prayer he never said out loud. The investigators later said they had never seen such an orderly crime. But they didn't understand her. Agnes had always made things tidy. Even grief. In the kitchen, her grocery list was still stuck to the fridge. Milk, carrots, toothpaste, birthday candles. Anne's birthday was a week away. She had bought the candles in advance. But never hid them. What kind of woman lives like that? The kind who believes, even in darkness, that love might return if you just keep the house clean. After her death, Xavier wrote letters. He explained her absence in bureaucratic terms. A family emergency, a relocation, a new life under protection. But none of his words mentioned love, or sorrow, or her name, just the family. But the house remembered her. The soft echo of her slippers on tile. The way she folded laundry in 3 exact motions. The scent of her lavender oil on the bedsheets that would never be washed again. Agnes Dupont de Ligonnès, wife, mother, believer. She loved beyond reason. She hoped past logic. She stayed long after it stopped being safe. And when she died as she lived, with grace, with order, and in silence. Xavier, the disappearance. On April 15, 2011. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès left his house in Nantes, locked the door behind him, and vanished. No one knows the exact moment he crossed the threshold, whether it was morning, or night, or twilight. But we know this. He did not run. There were no broken windows. No panicked calls. No signs of chaos. Only an open suitcase, a packed toiletry bag, and a receipt from a toll booth on the A71, dated and timed. In the days that followed, Xavier was seen. Not once, but many times. A hotel clerk remembered him. Polite, quiet, paid in cash. A waitress recalled that he ordered a salad. A glass of wine. He tipped well, thanked her in perfect French. A gas station camera captured him fueling up. Wearing beige pants, a navy jacket, carrying nothing but a small duffel bag and a look like he was listening to something only he could hear. He stayed in modest hotels. Left no mess, no note, no fingerprints, just names from novels, addresses from no one, cash pulled in even increments, the way you do when you've been planning something for a very, very long time. In Roquebrune-sur-Argens, his car was found, a Citroën C5, parked, locked, empty. Inside, a coat, a pillow, a half-empty bottle of water. Outside, a chapel nearby, a trailhead, and mountains that swallow sound. And that was it. After that, nothing. No more sightings, no more receipts, no more Xavier. Some believe he died there. That he walked into the wilderness, up the red dirt trails into the hills where no one could see him, and ended it. That he buried himself among the roots like the ghosts he created. That he became the last body unfound. But if he did, they never found a trace. No bones, no shoes, no note tucked under a rock. Nothing. Others say he escaped, crossed the border into Italy, took a boat to Malta, vanished into a monastery, or a new life, with a new name, and no mirrors. One man claimed to see him in Chicago. Another in Scotland. One woman swore he bought a croissant in Belgium with the same slight limp and the same hollow behind the eyes. But each time the police tested the DNA, it wasn't him. Each time the media gasped, the ghost remained a ghost. In 2019, a man was arrested at the Glasgow airport. Matching the description, French passport, strange behavior. The world held its breath. But it wasn't Xavier, just another stranger mistaken for a man who had already become myth. Some believe he was helped. That his disappearance was not an escape, but an extraction. That friends in high places, old business partners, religious connections, even intelligence services, helped him disappear in return for silence. A family secret traded for freedom. And then there's the letter. Typed, signed, stamped, sent to dozens of friends and family after the murders. "We've gone into protection," he wrote. "Don't try to contact us. We are alive and well. This is the only way. Xavier had always been a storyteller. Before he was a fugitive, he was a writer. He left notes in every drawer, printed pages on his desk, lines from the gospel on the fridge, a narrative threaded through ordinary things like he was laying out a novel for someone else to find. He didn't leave blood behind. He left structure, which is, in a way, more dangerous. Because when the crime feels clean, it begins to feel almost reasonable. His mother still believes he's innocent. His sister says he was framed, that the family is somewhere safe, that we have all been lied to, that Xavier was not a killer, but a man caught in something bigger than we can imagine. But the terrace remains, and under it, the truth wrapped in blankets and silence. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès, husband, father, believer, disappeared. He left a house full of ghosts, a trail of receipts, and a country searching every face for his shadow. Maybe he died that week. Maybe he walks among us. Maybe the real question isn't where he went, but who he was before he vanished. And how a man can erase himself so cleanly from the world he built and destroyed. This is the end of episode 1. Tomorrow, we begin again. This podcast episode contains fictionalized accounts inspired by real events. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination. Any similarity to actual persons, living or dead, or to actual events is purely coincidental.